Tanya Bag, and Diego Morales is entitled An Ethnobotanical Approach to Medicinal Plant Research in the Lowland Wet Forests of Costa Rica.
Good morning. I'm not going to use the mic because I'm very loud. I'm from New York. We are very honored to be here today, and thank you for coming to this session. I know it's the first one, so you're kind of waking up with us, and that's good. Before we begin, let me just explain that I am by training an ecologist, and so to enter the world of pharmacology or even medicinal chemistry is completely a foreign concept. But I have this amazing student, Sana, who is interested in medicinal properties of plants. And so together we united to create this project. So she's going to be presenting on the lab work that she helped to design and run. And I'll be presenting a little bit on the ecology part. My work is, again, also in traditional land management practices. And so I'm an ethnobotanist that really focuses on basketry plants. So this was a really interesting transition into the world of medicinal plants for me. And we have this amazing opportunity to work in Costa Rica in the lowland wet forests. So we work in the Maquenque National Wildlife Refuge. Many of you might have heard of La Selva Biological Research Station. That's also in Maquenque, but we go to a different research station that's there. It's actually a lodge, and they built the lab for us because my colleague has been working there for 15 years or so. Even though it's pretty close to San Jose, it's really 4.5 hours away because the roads are not paved and you'll always run into some drama along the way. So it takes a long time to get there. And once we're there, we basically stay. I've been going since 2010 as part of the National Science Foundation's REU program. And that's a research experiences for undergraduates grant. And we're very excited to work with ecologists to study the soil and primates and the insects and reptiles and amphibians. And so together we put together this huge picture of the Maquenque forests. And we're really studying our own interests there, but we unite to get this idea of what's happening. And so again, our work is mostly on the ecology, but we have, because of my passion in ethnobotany, this sort of link to the medicinal plants of the area. Here's some. Just to give you a little background on Costa Rica, this is an area that we all know of as a very richly diverse habitat. Tropical forests originally covered 99% of the country, but unfortunately now 90% of the original forests of Costa Rica have been destroyed, and 46% have been replaced by cattle pasture. In the area where we are, in the northern zone of Costa Rica, there was 40 years of deforestation, and that's led to 70% of the loss of the lowland forests. And these are areas, again, that have a huge amount of agriculture and cattle pastures that have been replacing them. So over time, hopefully, if the impact is not so severe, what we start to see is succession happening. And so our work is looking at how that changes in land management is going to be affecting the plant diversity in that area. So what I'm interested in is looking at both ecological and ethnobotanical indicators to help us find plants that are effective as medicines. And one of the plants that we've studied extensively since I started coming there in 2010 is Pentaclethra macrolova. And this is a nitrogen-fixing tree. It's a very early colonizer. It's a pioneer tree. So as soon as succession starts coming, you start seeing Pentaclethra. And it helps to recover some of that atmospheric nitrogen for the soil. But what's interesting is that my partner, who is a soil ecologist who studies soil microbes, has noticed that it has an amazing ability to kill off a lot of the soil the bacteria and fungi. And even though it has this amazing partnership with Frankia, it changes the soil dynamics. So we were interested to see if it changes the soil dynamics of the microbes, if it also could be used as a medicine against common bacteria and fungi. The same with bromelia. This is a bromelia. It's got huge leaves, and it's really, it's just an amazing plant in the forest because when you see bromeliads, you really don't see very much of anything else. It forms this natural monocrop, and it kills a lot of the soil fungi. So one of the things that we've been doing is looking at Pentaclethra and bromeliads and trying to see if we could see if they're effective as medicine. This is Israel, and he's the main sort of key informant in my life, and he's pretty phenomenal. He helped us to design these ethnobotanical indicators for medicinal plant research. So we looked at the ecology indicators or ecological indicators, and now we're looking at the ethnobotanical indicators, really relying heavily on this amazing man, Israel. Now, Israel is a man who actually is from Nicaragua, and this is very close to the Nicaraguan border. And so what has happened is that when times were tough in Nicaragua, a lot of the parents actually sent their kids across the river to Costa Rica, to family or people that might have been waiting on the other side. So literally swimming over the San Juan River and trying to get to a better life. But Israel's mother was a medicine woman, and she was very recognized throughout Nicaragua for her amazing depth of knowledge of plants and their uses as medicine. And so Israel took that knowledge base with him. And so even though he changed his country, the forests are very similar. And so he was able to recognize all of the plants. He has become such an amazing resource for the country of Costa Rica. And so the people who work for INVIO, which is their equivalent of the Smithsonian, really rely on Israel to help kind of identify the trees and to understand their ecology. Now, Israel doesn't know how to read or write, but he knows every single tree. And because he's been working with the people at INVIO, he knows the Latin names and the common names of every single plant in that forest. And he knows when to harvest them and for medicine and how to prepare them and what ailments they'll treat. So he is a phenomenal person and a great, great buddy of mine since 2010. So with his ideas, we decided to design this project of looking at the ethnobotany of these medicinal plants. So we gained IRB approval back in 2010. And we used the snowball method of sampling, starting with him and saying, okay, introduce us to other people who might know a bit about medicinal plants in the area. At the end, we wound up with 7 key informants. Now, you have to understand how remote this part of Costa Rica is, and the local town, which is still about, maybe 20 minutes away, has only about 150 people. So to find 7 people who have a really great knowledge of medicinal plants was pretty interesting for us. And we asked them to talk to us about their knowledge of medicinal plants, how they prepare them, what ailments they treat. This is an area where they don't have access to Western medicine very often, and so once a month a doctor comes, and if you schedule an appointment, you still have to wait in line by the doctor's office for 4 hours. So really, most of the treatments that they have are based on these plants. So this is Juanita, and this is Israel again. And what we did was we conducted a series of interviews with them. And I really wanted to find the plants that they had in common. Now, Juanita is Costa Rican by birth. And in fact, she had spent her entire life in this area of Boca Tapada. And Boca Tapada, in fact, her house is really only accessible by boat. And so it's an amazing thing to see this woman who raises a family completely off the grid, very sustainable. So all the food that she needs, she grows on her property, including her cattle and her crops. Her medicines are all there, and they really only go into San Jose maybe a couple times a year. And so she's really the epitome of sustainability to me. And so what I was looking for were the plants that they would have in common. So here we see achote, and that's basically a plant that they use the seeds for. And they're both explaining the process of how they harvest it and how they prepare it. And so at the end, looking at these 7 people, we documented 60 plants that were used for medicines in the area. Now this is a video that I embedded, but I embedded it into my Mac, and so I just tried and it doesn't work, unfortunately. But Israel's singing a song. And the idea of his song is that this is how he teaches everybody about the plants. He's an amazingly trusting man who just really wants everybody to know about the medicinal properties of the plants. And so he puts it into song so that everybody could remember what the plants are for. And so he's singing about Maquenque here, which is a plant that he uses, and talking about its uses for kidneys. And so, believe me, I can sing it for you, but you don't need to do that. But he's fantastic. So again, of those 60 plants, what I thought was interesting was to compare the people who had always been in Costa Rica, in Boca Tapada, and to compare those with the 3 informants that were from Nicaragua. So they had, again, left Nicaragua, usually near that border area, to get to Costa Rica for a better life. Now, the people who were always from Costa Rica mentioned 29 plants. 16 of those, which is 55%, were cultivated or found in gardens. 8 of those, which is only 27%, were forest plants that would grow wild. Now, if you compare that with the Nicaraguans, they mentioned 44 plants, and 36% of those were found in gardens, but 53 were those that occur in the forests. And so you see that there's a heavy reliance on forest plants for the people who immigrated from Nicaragua, whereas the Costa Ricans, who really were in that area, which included both men and women, really took to the plants that were around their homes, either as weeds or along roadsides or in their gardens. And this just shows that same information graphically. So again, the forest was a heavy source of the Nicaraguan plants. When we asked about their uses, most of the plants that were used by the informants were used for gastrointestinal issues. And one of the main reasons why is because they don't have access to clean water reliably. And so they have a lot of gastrointestinal issues. And so you see 22% of the plants that they use are used to treat those issues. 14% are used to treat skin ailments. And so a lot of those are skin infections that result from just always being wet in the rainforest. So if they wear rubber boots, there's going to be a lot of fungal infections on your feet. Or snake bites, or, I'm sorry, snake bites are separate, but mosquito bites will actually lead to infections on your skin. And so within half of this, what we see is a lot of reliance on infection treating plants. The other side is really split between everything from insomnia, diabetes, bloating, circulation, cancer, arthritis, all the different elements combined. So we focused on the infection issues. And we found that most of the plants that were cited were plants that we know here. We know guava, we know mononi, and we know oregano. And yet those are the plants that were most cited by almost every informant cited all 3 of those plants as treating digestion issues. So they also, for example, guava is used to treat digestive infections, specifically with diarrhea. Noni treats digestive issues and weight loss. The women said everybody plants noni because of its use, its weight loss supplement. And baldness, arthritis, hemorrhoids, and oregano is used to treat coughs and digestion. So we collected the plants with the local people this past summer. This is when Sana came in. And we basically went out to the field with them. And again, these are videos that I wish I could show you, but if they had said, we set the tree on fire and then we take the resin, it doesn't make any sense. But when you go with them and you actually see him set the tree on fire, what happens is you take some of the resin and it smells like citronella. And you realize it's used for, to keep the insects away, so you rub it on your skin. And this is Pentaclethra, and he scrapes the bark. But what he does is he scrapes it, and it goes into this palm leaf over here. And so it really is used, and that's how he gathers it. And it's just massive amounts of the bark that is used in his medicine. So together, we collected the leaves of 10 plants, the bark of 8 plants, 1 plant's rhizomes, 1 plant's seeds, and the sap of 2 plants. This is Raicea. Raicea is a plant that is being grown in Costa Rica, even though it's not from Costa Rica originally. It's from Brazil, but it's really heavily used for its effectiveness against coughs and colds. So I'm going to pass it over to Sana, because this is where she takes over with regards to the lab work.
Hi everyone, my name is Sana. Okay, so as Dr. SHEBITZ mentioned, the key informants helped us locate the plants in the rainforest. With their help, we were able to harvest the plants, and after harvesting, we carefully dried the plants, turned them into a fine powder to make the extractions, and we used aqueous and alcohol solutions. And from those solutions, we impregnated blank discs so that way the discs can have now the plant compounds. And we tested those plant compound discs against the different bacteria and fungi, which was Bacillus subtilis, E. coli, and Candida albicans. And we used those microorganisms because they are some of the most commonly used. And we decided to test against bacteria and fungi because those were the major contributors to the ailments they are facing. And so after testing them against the different microorganisms in petri dishes, we found that they showed great results. The microorganisms grew everywhere on the plates except around the discs. And so the greater the zone of inhibitory around the discs showed greater medicinal efficacy. And we measured those zones of inhibition and compared them to each other and saw how well the plants can serve as an antifungal or antibacterial compound. And so these are the discs we created with the extracts. You can see that some of the compounds left a gray color, like the one to the left. It turned the discs very green, but these over here were lighter color because they came from the sap of the plants and also the bark, but the darker colored ones, like the green ones, were from the leaves. That's me making the discs. And this is what the end results look like. These are the discs on the plates, and you can see the microorganisms growing everywhere. And the plants that did show some medicinal efficacy did not have any microorganisms growing around them. Like in this dish, you can see the microorganisms are not around that those discs. And these are some of the results. So some plants were resistant against bacteria, some were resistant against fungi, and some were even resistant against both bacteria and fungi. And this is a greater list with most of the plants we used here, with the different plant parts. Dr. SHEBITZ will tell you about the results in detail. And our next steps for future research include returning in 2014. Dr. SHEBITZ will be returning with other students. And I will be here continuing the research with different plant parts and also testing them against other microorganisms. And we also want to isolate the active compound in the plants and see what compound exactly is causing the antibacterial and antifungal properties. Okay. I'll pass it over to Dr. SHEBITZ.
So, as Sana mentioned, we're going to be going back and really trying to continue this work for a bit. It lays the foundation for future ethnographic and also ecological work. And really, the most important part is really trying to understand that complex link that exists between the culture and the plant diversity that's there. So again, my interest is in plant management. So I also want to see if there's ways of managing the plants in a fashion that would help to enhance the populations as opposed to just taking. And there's not a heavy reliance on these plants to the point where it's affecting the forest nearly as much as the agricultural industry is. But just to see if there's a way, for example, with Raicea, they're able to harvest it and then put the plants back in. They harvest the roots and actually put the tops of the plants back in, and the roots continue to grow. So it's a pretty amazing thing when you can find plant medicines that are available and sustainably as well. So we've only begun to appreciate that link. This summer, I'm interested in looking at one plant in particular that shows phenomenal results, and that's Vismia ferruginea. And when we did all of our trials, it was effective against everything. And so I'm going to be focusing on that plant and working with Israel to ask him to locate the tree within the forest. And when we're there, we're going to be working with GIS experts and soil experts to try to study its ecology and to see how the plant is being affected by land management in that area. So we're really going to be focusing on the plants that are most effective in these preliminary trials and getting to know them and trying to understand how they would be responding to those external pressures. So I want to thank our hosts here, the Society of Ethnobiology and the Society of Ethnobotany, as well as the Cherokee people for being our hosts, the National Science Foundation for funding our research, and Diego's not here, but he was also with us in Costa Rica, and we have some other students in my lab who are helping with the analysis. And obviously our key informants, this would not be possible without them in Costa Rica and our hosts there, which are at the Laguna de la Garza Lodge. Thank you. We can take one or two questions. Yeah.
What part of the avocado did you taste?
I'm sorry.
What part of the avocado?
Oh, the leaves. Isn't that, yeah, so the leaves of the avocado were what was most effective. Yeah. And that was what was used for the medicine.
Yeah, with the extraction mechanisms that you used, the water doesn't seem to be working for
Exactly.
extraction. Are you
Exactly.
expecting that some of the compounds are not water soluble?
So can I just go back really quickly? These are the ecological indicators that we use. In Pentaclethra, which is that tree, it was interesting that actually of the leaves, if I go, this worked on my computer, but on the leaves, it worked in the water. But we dropped the water for all of when we did the analysis. If you see this one just says ethanol and methanol. Really, those are the ones that are the most effective at extracting them. But occasionally, we do find that water is a good solvent. Yeah.
I want to advise that you use more than one bioassay method.
Yes.
Instead of Hager dilution method, you can use the diffusion method to interact the extract with the microorganism. You may get better results.
Thank you.
Then it's very important that you present the control experiment for us to assess the antimicrobial activity of your extracts.
Thank you. And we do. So we have controlled discs that are just ethanol, just methanol, and we do it against no antibiotic. But you're right, we're just beginning this process. And so this was the easiest one to take with us to Costa Rica. And so this year we have a permit to import, and so we'll be able to bring them back.
Finally, one will be interested in the minimum inhibitory concentration of your extracts.
Exactly. Yes. And that's the next step. Exactly. Yes. Yes. So some of them have and some of them have not. So, and really what we were looking at was getting it started with that process. But you're right, there's been some work, for example, on Vismia, but not extensively. There's only been a few articles that have been done. The ones that are more common, like oregano, of course, there's been extensive research done. But we were really just interested in getting something started and bringing the knowledge to the people that are there, that their work is being, or that their knowledge is being appreciated. Yeah.
Is there any explanation for the difference between knowledge between Costa Rican and Nicaraguan? Because Nicaraguan are better to find plants in the forest.
You know what? It's so interesting. I'm so glad you asked that. I think when I tried to analyze it, I think it's because the Costa Ricans were always where they are in their town. They never had to leave their home. And so when those Nicaraguans were leaving, right, they changed everything about their home except they recognized the forest trees. They recognized the plants in the forest. And so when a culture is sedentary for a while, they're able to grow plants by their home and able to recognize the weeds a lot more. Even just the change, whether it's 50 miles or so, could change their mentality as well. And so a lot of the people from Nicaragua that we spoke to actually, they rely on the plants that they recognize in the forest more than in their own home. So I think it's just that the idea of uprooting and moving.